Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Keisha Chandler, Executive Vice President of the Prospanica New York chapter. And we're so glad to have you with us for today's webinar, Elevating Voces, Mastering Communication and Leadership. Our voices are powerful tools for change, especially as leaders in our workplaces and communities. In this session, we'll explore how effective communication can strengthen our leadership, amplify our impact, and challenge the narratives that too often overlook our lived experiences. We'll dive into practical strategies to help you communicate with clarity, confidence, and authenticity. If you are someone who is leading a team, advocating for your community, or navigating high stakes conversations, your voice matters. And knowing how to use it with purpose is essential. Throughout the session, you will explore how to own your voice, inspire action, foster deeper connections, and lead in a way that reflects who you are and what you stand for. We're excited to have you with us today and hope you will leave feeling empowered to lead through your communication that's bold, intentional, and true to you. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce our speakers, Ana Valdez, President and CEO of the Latino Donor Collaborative, and Tomás Savino, CEO of Prospanica. Ana Valdez is a seasoned expert in marketing, media, research, and politics, bringing 30 years of global experience across business and corporate sectors. Originally from Mexico City, she has lived in Los Angeles since 1997 and has worked across Mexico, Europe, and the US. Her career includes roles at Nielsen, Banamex, now Citibank, the United Nations, the Clinton administration, and collaborations with major companies such as Wells Fargo, JP Morgan Chase, Procter & Gamble, and McDonald's. Joining her is Tomás Savino, a dynamic leader committed to advancing education and career opportunities for Hispanics. As CEO of Prospanica, Tomás brings a strong background in consulting, having worked at McKinsey and Company and later as a managing director at TMS Consulting. He specializes in organizational strategy and performance analysis, has worked with Fortune 100 companies, and has served on several national boards. Together, Ana and Thomas will guide us through today's conversation on elevating our voices and leading with purpose. So let's get started. To begin the conversation, I'd like to ask you both, as a leader of two respected national organizations serving Latinos in the United States, can you share your perspective on the role that communication plays in your success and the success of your organizations? Who wants to get started? Yeah?
I guess
Anna?
I'll go.
Oh,
Whoever hit the switch first.
yes.
Oh, you're on mute, Anna. I don't know if you wanted to go first. Okay.
My
I,
apologies. Maybe, yeah, anyway. Yeah, I'm perfectly okay if you start. I'm okay starting whatever you want.
well, you're definitely guest. I would defer to you. And first, let me say hi.
Okay.
I didn't get a chance to say hello. It's been a couple of years. It's great to see you. Thank you for coming.
The same, Tomas. Thank you so much for inviting me, Keisha, Prospanica in general. I'm really honored. You guys are the future of everything we do. So, and the present actually.
Um,
It's really an honor to be here. Thanks for inviting me. Tomas, thank you for your leadership. Well, I think, Keisha, this is for me, and specifically with what I do today, and I'll tell the audience a little bit of what I do, but it is vital. Communication, having a voice, being able to share, my thoughts, but also the data, right? So for those of you that don't know the Latino Donor Collaborative, we are a nonprofit think tank, and we produce data, economic data, on the contributions of Latinos in this country. And the reason why the board and the founding chairs, founding co-chairs actually put together this organization is that, both Sol Trujillo and Henry Cisneros decided that there was a huge gap between what Latinos perceive, actually what Americans perceive about Latinos and the reality of who Latinos are. And within our community, we know that we've done well. We know that our upward mobility is good. But the truth is that you have all these other voices, unfortunately, sometimes in politics, most of the times in media, that really portray us not accurately. And so the idea with what we do every day is create the data that shows the reality of who we are. And we are spectacular, let me tell you. We are the engine of growth of this country. If Latinos, US Latinos, were an economy, they would be the fifth largest economy in the world, bigger than any European country, well, except Germany, projected to overpass Germany, actually. But anyway, so that's what we do. And so to your question, how important communication is, the data that we do is very innovative. And as innovative as it is, if we didn't actually communicate it, if we didn't go to all these forums like yours today, right? If we didn't go to the Federal Reserve, if we didn't go to the US, to the Congressional Economic Council, if we didn't go to the president, to the campaigns, etc., people wouldn't know these numbers. So I would say that the data is important, but I think the communication effort is even more. The difference between the numbers staying in the drawer and the numbers actually being known by every American.
Thank you. Tomas?
Yeah, in communication, it's this big term, but it's really job one, right? And we've recognized that for years. Every couple of years, the board will say, well, if we had all the money, what would you do? And we typically couch that in terms like marketing, but it's about marketing communication. And marketing communication is I think then some people get stuck. It's what we're telling people. It's also what we're hearing. It's what data we're getting from our people. What are they experiencing, right? And we just had a joking conversation in the green room, right? We are a diverse community, right? So it's more important for us we should be careful in New York not to think we know everything, what everybody else is feeling, all the Latinos feel around the rest of the country, because there are different there's a lot of overlap, but there's different priorities.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's job
Absolutely.
one for us, and it's also challenge one for us, right? I think so it's challenged for a couple of reasons. We have a lot of different partners. Of course, our own diversity, as I just mentioned. Then we have our corporate partners, and then we have our university partners, and our chapter offices who are a little different from our membership, right? And the challenge to do all that communication with them on a sustained basis is very hard. Now, including in modern times with all the social media out there, all the messages they're getting in it, it feels like every 2 weeks there's a new Latino organization. And so, are we getting our message out there, right? And are we hearing back from them at the same time? And then, yes, of course, later, what are we doing with all that? But it's job one. And I think one thing we've seen on our board, that we've got some very accomplished marketing people on our board. Very specifically, we used to do a lot of finance accounting. We still have it, but we can do that in our sleep. It's the communication that is imperative for us. And while there are more tools, it might be even more challenging today. In the old days, you worried about, I remember in the New York chapter, can we get this out before the event to let everybody know the event's going to happen, right? And then you'd hope to get some information, this is in the 90s, from the people who showed up. That's as good as you could do, but you did it. Today, there's just too much. And what do you get and how do you get it? And when making sure things like sampling is correct and that sort of thing. So it's an imperative. It's the most important thing we do. It's also the most challenging thing we do.
So you said that it's too much. How do we make sure that we communicate the right things?
Well, you know, sometimes I think we're doing a good job now.
Mm-hmm.
The challenge usually for us is is it enough, right, for individual groups? I think we're getting at a place. I think if you see some of the attendance we're getting, for instance, we're getting to people. Still gathering the information is challenging, and not just a loud squeaky wheel, right? That's important. But you know, again, I worked in the mathematics department for McKinsey for 2 years, right? So me getting a good sampling and being careful with we survey, but even being careful of the faults behind the survey are very important. So I won't tell you there's a magic formula about it. Uh, Someone like myself, and I think our team, I rather have too much and then sift through it, right, and find my trend lines and work through it and monitor it over time, because things change too, right? Things change.
Yeah.
Um, a new priorities in the country by the administration, and people start feeling differently. My old data might be helpful, but I really need new data. So it's something we continually work on.
Thank you both for those insights. So Anna, this next question is for you. Thinking about representation in this country and its economy, why do you believe the voice of Latino leaders is important within organizations?
Yeah. And let me go back to something that Tomas said. Um, it's interesting because you're right. There are a lot of different communications. I feel that I have the best job in the history of the world because my priority communicate. Obviously, I have a team and I love my team, and the communication amongst us is really important. But I feel so we've actually focused very much on talking points to the outside, and all of them based on facts.
Mm.
So we go exactly as Tomas says, they change and they have to do with the current events, they have to do with new reports that we do, but we try to focus on talking points that serve everybody. Not only Latinos, not only Latino organizations, but every decision maker in this country, right? So where does the growth come from? What does the Latino audience, which is 20% of the population, 25% of the youth, and 30% of the births, can bring you, any American, to grow, right? And so,
Mhm.
if anything, if I could advise, the audience, it's create the talking points that serve your audience and then focused on them. It's sometimes better to have, 5 to 10 talking points a month rather than 1,000 messages that that will be lost. And some people will pick up some people will pick up others, but the power is within the mainstream talking points that can help everybody. And for that, by the way, go to our website because we have a communication hub that has talking points monthly, and I think that's important. But then to your question, remind me the question.
So the question was thinking about our representation in this country and its economy. Why do you believe the voice of the Latino leader is important within the organizations?
Thank you so much, Keisha.
Yes.
And so because it probably ties a little bit of what I just said, which is, we need to make sure that people know who we really are, not the Narcos movie and the series of, Mayans MC and, Miss Bala and Lucrecia or Griselda or como se llame, they're entertaining shows, but they're not who we are. And I'm not saying there are no narcos in our society. There are, but they're less than 3%. And, that's not who we are, right? I bet the story of Tomas and the story of Kisha and the story of Anna and the story of every one of the people in this audience is worth telling. And why focused only on the negative, right? So to your question, why is it important? We need to make sure that we unify in creating a complete panorama of who we are, right? The immigrant, I'm an immigrant, right? So the immigrant that came here, some of them with nothing, some of them with education, the upward mobility of immigrants, we all know in this call, the person that came to work in the farms, the person that came to work as a gardener 30, 25 years ago. And today they have 5 kids and the kids go to college and they are in a complete different position because of the sacrifices of the generation, right? Of the preceding generation. And so my point is, all those stories are worth telling. Also the stories of the young people that are going to college, that are graduating, that are getting into the executive ranks, that are founding businesses, that are buying their houses in their 20s or 30s, things that the parents couldn't do. So I think spreading the word of who we really are in general is extremely important. And this is my question when people say, well, I'm really in finances, or, I'm really a doctor, or, meaning like what they want to say is, I don't really care what people think about me. Believe me, you should care. Because when your kid, if the last name is Valdez or Sanchez or Lopez, applies to a school, they haven't even met him. They haven't even seen the resume, but they're already making decisions in their minds as to where this kid should go or not go. When you go to the doctor or when you call and make an appointment, they will take in account your last name and who they perceive you are, or where that you come from. Everywhere you go, when you're applying to a job, when you are being evaluated for a promotion, everywhere you go, the perception of who we are is really important, and it's on us to start creating a real perception, fact-based.
I really agree with everything that you said, Hannah, and thank you for that. So Tomas, turning to you, how do you adapt your communication when addressing diverse audiences from boardrooms to community events?
Yeah, I think first of all, I'll point out, I know it's a struggle, and having a lot of years intentional behind me have helped. Excuse my allergy-driven voice, by the way. It's getting a little weak on me.
Oh,
If you think about it in life, people speak to their parents differently than they might speak to their friend, right? Then they'll speak to their teacher, right? And there's a lot of things that go into that. It's tone, it could be language, right? It's body language. And even the extent of, say, technical language will be different. So I don't think it's a lot different there, other than sometimes what people miss is, and my undergrad is on public relations. And so in public relations, you scientifically would be very much in tune with, who am I talking to, right? And again, we talked a little bit of this before, what's on their agenda, and even the environment they're currently in. I'll say, I think if I had to give a business speech in the Vatican City today, it would be much different than a month ago, right? Like my tone would be a little calmer, a little bit more humble. My body language might be a bit more reserved, uh, because there's a sense of mourning right now and there. So you're in a very distinct environment, and you need to be conscious of that. Wherever you go, again, I was at a mathematics department. The way we would speak there, probably more dry a little bit, but with a lot of fun and jokes, but far more technical, um, to use for that group. So knowing the group is super important if you can know the group. We don't always know the group. I bet Anna has walked into some rooms and wasn't really, because I do, and I'm
yeah,
not really sure who's in the room, right?
right.
And you go to something and there's a couple, Henry Cisneros is there, an elected official, and then there's a bunch of young students there. And um, sometimes what I do to better understand with whom I'm speaking is I start with questions to the community, right? Sometimes if it's a chapter leader thing, I may ask how many people are new to the organization. I've done that before, right? I've walked in a little blind. And I'm like, oh, there's a lot of new people here. That tells me to pivot versus if it's all right, all these guys know me, so we can, and they already know our issues. So it's definitely knowing who you're speaking to, the current environment and they're in, because again, that could have changed. We've mentioned that a few times quickly. Um, and then how you're trying to connect, right? I think one thing I try to do, particularly, I wouldn't do this, in a big presentation, but particularly like say within Prospanica, especially is whether you're going to talk about. See, if I'm talking to the young students, I'm probably bringing up my 23-year-old son, right? As my example, because I would not be an example for them now, in some ways, right? Or if they could laugh about, I'm good with tech, by the way, but not as good as the 23-year-old, right? So it's a different way to connect. And so knowing that group is really the all important for me. And again, knowing where we are and knowing the time and space we're in can then help guide me. Also, I'll adapt it disregarding all those things, and I will adapt it based on, I think, years of experience. Um, I'd say a bit more careful because I'm very direct, right? So with senior people, senior executives, I let the directness go, right? Unless I've learned they're not good with, not everyone likes directness. Not everyone can handle directness. Um, I would expect it from our senior leaders. I would tell you our senior leaders easily handle it. Um, and so in the organization. But so, and that's for precision, right? And that's why when you direct, everyone knows you said the exact words you meant that, and so but not everybody has either grown to that or gotten to that part or appreciates it. So there's a directness sometimes because we've done this as a team, kind of measured our ability to be direct and what you expect in terms of in return. And so I noticed directness changes a little depending on who I'm talking to. And again, that usually goes with experience and where they are hierarchical and all that sort of thing. Because we do, you expect the more seasoned people to be able to, not always true, but you expect that if you don't know that. So there's that element. So all those elements go into it. And it sounds like a lot, but I just want to remind you, we do that all the time, right? I mean, again, we do that in our families. We do that with our friends. It's just being intentional of those things and taking it to different communities of where we go. The last thing I'd say of trying to measure all that is you've probably been in a small group and maybe somebody's making jokes and nobody's laughing. That should have been an easy cue to that person telling the joke. Maybe I don't need to tell a joke or I'm not funny. The same way when you speak, you should look at your community, look at your group. Are they looking away? Are they bored? Are they angry? Right? Are they riveted? Right? So there are cues you can look at while you're speaking, right? Because they're communicating with you that way to tell you about how you should adapt. I've lost this crowd. What do I need to get them back? Right? So those are some things you can do. It probably made it sound much harder than it is, but again, I just want to remind you, you do it all the time. But just be intentional. I do know some great speakers who don't pay attention to the people they're speaking to, and sometimes they wind up off. So that's how I do it.
Tomas, I think you brought up a good point in terms of looking or eye contact, right? It's so important to make eye contact so that you could have these conversations, right? So I know you said you had a 23-year-old son. So what do you, this generation, they say doesn't make eye contact is one of their issues, right? So what tips do you give him in terms of making eye contact and making sure that he's communicating effectively?
Yeah, so I get what they're saying, but I actually find like they do Friendsgiving here, right? So
Uh-huh.
16 of his friends come over and uh we're supposed to do nothing, but you know how that goes when the kids are in your house. You're really working hard. I find they do a good job, Keisha. I'm going to be very honest with you, and maybe it's
Mhm.
because they all went to college together. Of course, raising my kids with the good handshake and the good eye contact and the ability to have a conversation on social conditions is I don't want to say it's mandatory. It's just how they were raised, right?
Mhm.
And so, and raised in this world would have been a business community. I was raised that way, but maybe some worlds of, growing up in the Bronx, it wasn't always business communities that I was used to. So I think they do a really good job. I would even say you could see them be a little intentional about not getting on that phone right away. They're going to get on it, but not right away.
Mhm.
So I've been very pleased with even at conference, boy, the young students, the undergrads will come up and they'll introduce themselves and they'll do it all right. And I'll tell you, a lot of older people don't. I've a little hint, not even a hint. When I first started, I watched my team at an event. It was 30 people we had on the team. And we brought in Miss Manners from Texas because I noticed they wouldn't look people in the eye. She went around the horn to shake everybody's hand. I'm the only one who stood up and gave her a proper hello and looked her in the eye and said something. Everyone else kind of, "Hey, how you doing?" And so it was helpful to teach those little things, because it shows in conference, right? And everyone can be more confident to them. So yeah, I've actually been very pleased. I'm sure there are groups of young people who can't do it, but I've been very pleased with the young people and their ability to do that.
I totally agree. I have a 22-year-old and I see the same. And as an educator in my professional life, I do see that with our students. Anna, do you have any thoughts on that topic?
Yes, of course. So I also have a 23-year-old.
Ah,
And so yes, I agree with you personally, and I agree with you with the data. I think that, and then I'll tell you a little bit of an exception or maybe the challenge part, right? So yeah, like you, Thomas, my kid has been told since he was born that he needs to look in the eyes and shake, have a powerful shake, handshake when they do meet somebody and when they greet somebody. I also think so that's personal, and his friends too. So that's really great. I also we did a report last year with Kantar, which is the leading, consumer market, research company in the world. And uh, four brands joined us: L'Oreal, Colgate Palmolive, Capital One, and Univision. And we found the things that we found in that report. And again, please go to our website. We distribute all of our information for free. You don't have to do anything except just register and then download every information. And for every report, by the way, we have an infographic, so you don't have to read the whole report. But one report that we did with them says that the generation of our kids, the same family, same blood, etc., is infinitely more assertive. They have been raised in a society where they are proud of who they are. They're unapologetically Latino. They also feel that they don't have to choose. We call it the 200 percenters. And they feel 100% American and they feel 100% Latino. And they are comfortable navigating, between both or in both all the time. And so that makes them really assertive. They also know that their parents made a lot of sacrifices for them, and they've been translating for them, they've been advocating for them forever, and they know that their parents have earned already a place on the table, right? And so they are so much more assertive. And I agree with you that it used to be the myth, and maybe it is for other communities, but in the case of the Latino community, there's this pride that has emerged that we, unfortunately, my generation didn't have. And not that we weren't proud, especially me, because I come from another country, so it was easier. But not that people weren't proud of being Latino. It's that they were, like, for example, my husband, right? He was a Latino in Colorado, and he was, the teacher, the I'm sorry to say this, but the non-Latino teacher hit him every time he spoke in Spanish. So it was a different world. I know people that are in high places that just came out of, as I say, just came out of the closet as Latinos because they saw how their parents were, tortured. And so my point is, back to your question, I think our kids are in much better shape than we were and than we thought they would. And then the last point is the challenge. We also did it. We have done two reports with SHIP, the Society of Latino Engineers. And one of first of all, the results are fantastic. I mean, our kids are going to school, they are enrolling in engineering, they're graduating, even though they are going through so much. We measure that generation that went through COVID, which of course had a lot of them homeless because they were counting, they lived in school, they ate at school, they worked at school. So they had to go back to their homes where, their brothers, their little brothers and sisters were, surviving, also the grandmother, et cetera, et cetera. So even though they had a lot of challenges, they graduated. But there were three things. It's so interesting. There were three things that they said they needed. And believe it or not, in the three, it was not financial aid. The first one was role modeling. The second one was mentorship. And these two are so important because that's where the three of us kids didn't need it because we've been mentoring them since they were born, right? You have to shake your hand, etc. But of course there are first gen kids that didn't. And so if talking about a voice, talking about helping others build that voice, I think this incredible, advice that we just gave everybody that is listening to us, when you greet somebody, be strong, be proud, show it with your eyes, show it with your hand. And that is probably one of the most important presentation card characteristics that you can give somebody when you are being interviewed.
Thank you. Um, Earlier we talked about talking points, and as you know, Anna, content is king right now, right? In social media. How do you create those talking points that serve all audiences? And I'm gonna add, Tomas said earlier too that we're all different, Latinos, right? So that must pose like a big challenge in creating those talking points. So how would you go about creating meaningful content so that you're creating these talking points that serve the all audiences?
Right. So the one thing that I'm lucky about is that we are completely focused on economic growth. So of course that includes engineering, and that includes the reports about, the consumption habits, and that includes the GDP and the tech report and the AI report. But everything is about growth. The truth is every single community within the Latino community is growing. So everybody, like Cubans, Mexicans, and it's true that Mexicans are 60% and Cubans are 4% and Puerto Ricans are 16%. It is true that maybe the proportion is not exact, but it is very per capita. Everybody's growing economically. So the points of, your parents build the fifth largest economy in the world resonates with everybody because we know that we're growing. We know that, whatever we're doing here in this country is actually making this country better. And we know it instinctively, but the numbers are meant to make you know it with data. So that is that's one part. So growth is growth, and numbers are numbers. The second part is that the reason why we do so many reports is so that we know, first of all, who are Latinos, and then what's in it for non-Latinos of what Latinos are. So we don't go to non-Latinos and say, we're really great because we're the fifth largest economy and we're very, our upward mobility is great. We actually go to them with, I'm bringing you a growth opportunity. So what do you mean a growth opportunity? Well, do who, according to the Department of Labor, do you know who's providing 78% of all the new workforce in the next 10 years? No, I want to know. The CEO, right? I want to know, tell me, the US Latino community. And all these are numbers from, entities that are controlled by the government, that are completely, official, et cetera, right? Do you know who's buying almost 50% of all the new homes every year? Latinos, even though
Latino.
they're only 20%. And by the way, most of them are young people. Even then, they are. Do you know who's opening also more than half of the new businesses every year? And so the way we, and there are many other ways, of course, but the way we actually figure out the talking points is from who we are, what's in it for all Americans. So that's why, we speak everywhere because everybody wants to know where the growth is coming from. And we find that it is a really great way of branding our community too, because it's not a relaunch of a detergent. It is actually a position, an ownership of our narrative with facts. And so as we provide growth opportunities to every American, we're also rebranding who we are.
That's interesting that you say that we're rebranding who we are, right? Because we also, I think we also want to keep our authenticity. So how do we rebrand without losing that authentic flavor style that Latinos bring to the table?
So that's a really great question. First of all, some of us immigrants, we can't be anything except who we are. I mean, my accent, my brown color, the way I dress, the way I express my feelings is completely, you can never, or you should never run away from it.
Right.
So who we are is our brand. I mean, I speak with my huge accent in front of all the CEOs and I think authenticity, unless you're trying to be what you're not, and of course I know that happens and it's
Mhm.
sad, and we all have seen people trying to do it, and unfortunately it's usually not very successful. But I think you need to be authentic. You can't try to be what you're not, because what you are is really good. And exactly as you're saying, our culture is amazing. We
Right.
according to this report that we did with Kantar, um, Latinos are actually driving pop culture already. We're not gonna drive pop culture. We are already driving pop culture. And non-Latinos are trying to learn Spanish, and they follow a Bad Bunny,
Funny.
want to dance like we dance. And Coachella is made out of all, I don't know about you, but there are tons of people that sing at Coachella that people go crazy with them, and I've never heard their names. And they are singing in Spanish. I mean, the young people, Latino and non-Latino, are already being driven. So why hide? Quite frankly,
Mhm.
right? I mean, authenticity is the most important part of it. And so I think it's a personal, branding of your own, individual. But to the data, uh, our report also, and you really, and both Ship and Kantar say that Latinos again are so proud. They don't need to, like, you see some of the focus groups, kids saying, my mom used to be embarrassed of the lunch that, her mom put for her. And I am actually always the most popular guy because I'm bringing my burrito and my taco and my pupusa and my it's another world for them. They have
Mhm.
created another world because they are very, very proud. So I think we just have to learn from them. I have a friend, I presented at a bank about 2 months ago, and this friend of mine came to me after and she said, everything that you're saying makes so much sense. Her name, she always identifies herself as Tony. And she said, this morning when I drop off my kid, and I mentioned my name when I was dropping her off, I said, hey, Tony here. And she, in front of everybody, said, my mom, why do you say Tony? You're Maria Antonieta. Her name is Maria Antonieta, teacher or miss or whatever. And so
Uh-huh.
I think we all we can learn of authenticity from our kids, I think.
Absolutely. They keep us humble, right?
Exactly.
Tomas, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, the branding concept for Hispanics, Latinos is interesting because while there's always been for a long time this notion of unity, um, there hasn't always been the capture, right? I think Hispanic, 1970, and a growing urges in the 60s that we are united at some level. So we ourselves have been trying to figure that out to some degree. Well, then I think some of the branding we didn't own, and some of it was negative, right? Through those decades, right? Negative stereotypes about Latinos were there as we're still trying to. Right? Keisha, you grew up in New York City?
Yes, I did.
All right, in the 70s, didn't matter what you were, everybody was Puerto Rican, right?
Yes,
And all the groups were
And in
called
the
Puerto
West Side,
Rican.
everybody was Mexican.
Right, absolutely.
true.
I joke on my team. It's a Southern California team now. I didn't know a Mexican American until I got to college and when I went to Boston, right?
Yeah.
So this whole notion of how we brand ourselves, how we are together and united and when we are, is still newish in the history of the United States. And I do think the great work, and this is something, by the way, I mean, Anna's here. I was super happy if anybody's seen her presentations because, that is, I agree, everything she said is I want our leaders to know that in our organization, you know, some of our people still don't have this, what we consider everyday information. I still see people like Anna and everybody's like, I didn't know that. And I'm like, how did you not know that?
Yeah.
Right? Because that's still the branding. This is still information they could use to self-brand, right? Like, wow, I didn't know our own power and,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. So I think
Absolutely.
our branding is still somewhat new. I think it's an opportunity because I do think it's emerging, especially the data. The data is
Absolutely.
there, right? I
Yeah.
think I
Yeah.
think we all still need to. There are challenges when it comes to the branding. We know at a time like this, when do we unite? When do we not? But that's
Yeah.
another story. But for branding, it's kind of new in our history, and I think it's a bigger opportunity, but the data will get us there to a large degree. And I think maybe because the world I'm in, I think we're starting to win out. There's a lot of good work done by Anna and a lot of other people we work with to get out the facts and get them out in front of people. Because the facts, as long as people don't doubt us, because there's a lot of doubt about facts nowadays also,
Yeah.
they speak for themselves. So
I agree with
Right.
you, and I agree with you that there are different priorities in each one of the communities, but I got to tell you, when I came to this country later in life, so I was in my late 20s, and I remember being very surprised how everybody thought that all Latinos were Mexicans. And I was like, great, I'm Mexican, so I'm perfectly great. But I feel bad for all the other people, right? Because within our community, we're very aware of the differences. But outside the community, quite frankly, like Emilio Stefan says, for non-Latinos, we're all Mexicans. I mean, and so I think you're right, it's challenging because on the one hand, you don't want to generalize. And on the other hand, yeah, like we need to be together. So it is a little bit of a challenge, but again, the economics, we have that in common. And maybe, and as I was saying it, Tomas, you're right. Even in Puerto Rico, things are not as prosperous as Puerto Ricans in the country, right? I mean, so that I would say is the only caveat to my point of all of us are prospering. Um, because not everybody in the island is prospering, and so yeah, it's a little bit, sometimes I try to start with like the Pareto bell and say, okay, let's say Mexicans are 60%, okay, and then Puerto Ricans and then are 16%, and so it's a little bit like maybe we should go by ways. I don't know, I'm actually trying to figure it out because we're a powerful community because we're so many, um but that also has challenges.
Challenges, yes. Perfectly said.
Mhm.
Um, so to wrap up our discussion, I'd love to hear from both of you on a more forward-looking note. What gives you hope about the future of Latino leadership in corporate America?
Okay, I'll start. Sorry, I'm like, we're in this principle of primero las damas, pero bueno, thank you so much. I appreciate that. So young people, youth. Our youth, 94, according to the census, 94% of all the young people in the Latino community was born in the United States, was born a citizen. So their first language is English. 94% of them have citizenship, so they're not trembling constantly. Of course, their parents are still at risk, but still. And so, and these kids have the best of both worlds. They have parents maybe that were underserved, but they have now a different life and they have seen their parents struggle. So I think our youth is incredibly rich. They have tools that we didn't have and that other people in their generation don't have either. So for me, it's young people and data, because of course I love data.
The data is important.
Yeah.
So I'll follow it up. Oh, look at that. My Alexa's going off by accident right now.
Oh.
I don't know how that happened. Yeah, I mean, it does start with the data because it is really compelling and it's an imperative. Anybody who joined here, if they haven't been to the site, needs to really go there.
Please
It's, and if you get a chance to see Anna give one of her more data-driven presentations,
yeah, of
every
course.
slide is a ton to chew on. So there's that. And we've
Yeah,
talked about some of the other stuff, right? Some of the good emerging things that's related, everything's related to the data, right? That's related to our branding.
yeah,
The cultural impact where we continue to have that's greater and greater, and maybe we're not always aware of it. We take it for granted, right?
yeah.
Like, I mean, because it's what we listen to. There are things we take for granted.
Yeah.
Anna mentioned earlier something about her accent, and I'm like, oh, I guess she's got one. I didn't hear that she had an accent, right? Like, I think it's really cool, and you speak beautifully. So,
Oh,
but
oh,
Mhm.
thank
we
you so
don't
much.
always
My kids are the
recognize,
ones reminding me constantly.
uh, but we don't
And
always
I'll add
recognize those things.
confidently too.
Yeah, totally.
Sorry, Thomas.
Yeah, no, and there's other compelling instances that show us things will get there if we're intentional and we push, right? The high school graduation rate for Latinos, I think about 20 years ago, was a little over 50% nationwide. It's over 80% now, right?
94.
Oh,
94.
there. Oh, look at that. She's got more recent data. It's not fair.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, so, which also means now the amount of maybe over the last 15, I know you tell me, the amount of Latinos getting a college
Yes.
education has
We're the
skyrocketed.
fastest growing. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. Mhm.
For our community, I think in the last 15 years, I'm looking at Anna again. Uh, it kind of was up and down for years when I joined Nishimba, our predecessor in like 1992. It was always 4%, 6% Hispanics getting MBA. That number is now 10%. It went up in the last 15 years, or I better go to the site to get my latest numbers.
Yeah.
So, but those are pretty remarkable things. There's teenage pregnancy things that are involved with there in the high school. Those are very compelling changes. Those are big changes in numbers that
Mhm.
shows
Yeah.
we faced a major challenge and we've mostly conquered it or improved upon it. There
Yeah.
is still plenty to do, but we've had success. We've displayed success. So it's there along with the data. We
Yeah.
can do it as long as we come together like today, right? And so many other ways we will do it. So
Yeah.
that's why I have hope. And yeah, absolutely have hope because we just
Absolutely.
see it so many places.
So, and Thomas, let me add yet another number. The nerd comes here yet again. So yet another number. The age most populated in the Latino community, this is all census, US census, is 12 years old. The age most populated in the non-Latino community is 56. So that means that the majority of our kids haven't even entered the workforce or college. So imagine in the next 6 to 10 to 12 years how these kids will enter colleges and then the graduate degrees, and so we haven't even peaked. That's the interesting part.
Thank you both so much for this amazing conversation. You shared such impactful information around elevating our voices, truly valuable insights we can all take with us. With all we've learned today, I would like to shift gears and move into our live Q&A. This is your moment, our viewers, to drop your questions in the comments and hear directly from our experts. So let's get started. So, our first question is, how do you build a communication framework that sustains psychological safety in environments that that are also performance driven and high pressured? Sorry. So who wants to tackle that one?
That's
Now
pretty
now
true.
it's Thomas turn.
It's in the data.
Can you just read that one more time? Because I think there's a couple of pieces there actually. So
There is. So how do you build a communication framework that sustains psychological safety in environments that are also performance driven and high pressured?
Well, you know, if my team was asking me, I'd say, well, ask me tomorrow or something. Um, no, I think, but you know, you said data driven, right? And this goes back to your sensitivity. First of all, I think, let me back up. When we do that, it's about our team, right? It's about our board with their thought leadership, and we have the PCSJ, and I would probably call the PCSJ with you know, people like Richard Lopez, Dr. Lori Kidos, and Dr. Damon Kelly, who are expert on the psychological safety thing. Keisha, I know you know them well,
Yep.
because they are expert at that, right? And because it's always, as a leader, you always recognize what you know and what you don't know. So I'm better at coming out fiery, but doesn't always create a safe space all the time,
Mm.
right? So there's that. It starts with the team, but then it also starts with you know, it starts with putting together a plan with the team, but gathering data and getting the sensitivities of where people are, right? I think sustained, I think that, I don't know what we think about things like that. Sustained, I think communication and how we communicate is changing all the time. And then the tone of seems to be changing frequently, or our reaction to the current tone that we're hearing is changing. So it's about our team, if anything, sustaining about what we're understanding and monitoring what's going on, so that, and when we can be in front of it, be in front of it. When we need to react. Um, but definitely, you know, we're not every, you know, like you say experts, but not everyone's an expert in everything. So we definitely rely on our team and our membership and our chapter leaders to say, hey, Thomas, here's what's going on, right?
Mm.
Here's what I'm feeling, right? That sort of thing's super important. Or you guys were good last year, but that stuff is old and that's not helpful this year. Uh, we get all those helpful remarks at times, so, which are very, by the way, very important. So as I smile, so um, I hope that helps about where we are. It is what we do. We don't always do it right. I could tell you, Keisha, you remember at a leadership summit, someone's Latina identity had been challenged, and she was
Mhm.
very upset. I was coached to go out and be a good listener and to be sensitive. I tried, but I also needed to make sure I told everybody it was my job to protect everybody. See, I'm saying it now. I'm a protector. I'm the oldest in the family, and I would make sure that everyone's protected in that room. Did I say it in a very sensitive way? No, it was more of a I will hold you accountable way. You
Mhm.
know, and so, but I needed that coaching to help balance it out, by the way. So just as an example of what I needed, uh, and continue to need when it comes to that.
But
Hope that
I agree
helps.
with everything that you said, and I wasn't, you know, in the room, but it sounds to me like exactly as you said it, protecting everybody also means making people accountable, even
Mhm.
if their feelings are hurt. So I think, sometimes that'll happen, and if the intention is right, we have to do it. It's hard, but you have to do it.
Thank you. I agree with what you said as well. The next question is, what are the most subtle yet impactful signals leaders send through nonverbal communication, and how do you remain conscious of them at scale?
Oh, that's a good one.
Mm.
I it has to do with probably feeling comfortable with what you're saying, with where you are, your position within the conversation. And it has to do also with arming with the data that you want to use to make your point.
Mhm.
Um, I think it's your sometimes, and I'm gonna be the mother here. It's your posture, right? It's your focus. It's the way you're listening to the conversation, not to just waiting for your turn, but listening to what everybody's saying so that you can, kind of summarize it, take it in account, and then express your point of view. But with, you know, as a dialogue rather than just as a monologue, right? But it's a lot of, you know, the nonverbal, you know, where your hands are, how many times you say, oh, oh, you know, like it's all this, you know, all these ways of kind of boycotting your own your own dialogue, that we all do at the beginning, by the way. Young people, don't worry, we all do that at the beginning, but the idea is to get rid of them as much as you can.
You know, I think when you think about presenting, though, you know, because some people get right in a groove and they get very passionate, right? If you can take a breath and just look to see all the things Anna just talked about, what's happening, right? Or should you ask a question that might give you a little feedback? No one raised their hand, right? Or no, everyone's like, what did he say? That might be a mild tip off. You know where I struggle is in this format. I will tell you, it's harder to read like your own team.
Yeah.
That's why we try to have everybody on camera in team meetings. But a
Mm.
couple of years ago, you know, you could still fake it, right? People could fake it. They could be on, and you don't catch all their body language. You might catch their face or something. And so it was harder to be when we had a year with bad team dynamics. It was in an office, I could catch it instantly, right?
Yes.
Who the
Yeah.
way people turn towards you, all these things we've been talking about, the way they frown at each other. But on Zoom, it's much harder. Like right now, what is
Yep.
the audience thinking? I don't know.
You don't know.
There are
Absolutely.
some big meaty questions out there. We know that. So
Definitely. I agree with you.
And
Def
before we end it, I want to go back to that, to one of the responses from the first question. I think it was Anna. You said you hold people accountable. Um, how about apologizing? Does that ever come up in the communication framework for psychological safety? And is it performance driven and high pressure to apologize?
Yeah, yeah. Of course. I think, you know, accountability means apologizing sometimes, right? I mean, there's no way out of that one. I find, and maybe it's the way I was raised, maybe because I was raised in another country, I find that my upbringing had a lot of apologizing. So sometimes I've actually heard people saying, stop apologizing. Maybe it is women, but I think it depends, you know, for boys and girls, you know, men and women. Um, I think it finding the right balance of apologizing is like not the like I'm sorry, oh I'm sorry, like you know, I think it's we all have to find our own perfect medium.
I agree. I'm one of those. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Right? We say I'm sorry for
I'm
what?
breaking out of it, but I am one of those. I'm sorry.
Yeah, exactly.
And
yeah.
I want to be, yes, go ahead, Tomas.
No, if I see we're about to run out of time. I do think I try to make sure I apologize. I think it's important if you're going to be authentic and you want to role model that. And I think you also have to honor it in return.
Yes, exactly. I agree.
Absolutely. And that's a great way to end, right? So as we conclude today's webinar, Elevating Voces, Mastering Communication and Leadership, we'd like to express our heartfelt thanks to Anna, Tomas, and everyone who joined us today. Your presence and participation were key to making this session both impactful and engaging. We're especially grateful to Prospanica for their continued support in promoting leadership excellence. Looking ahead, we're excited to invite you to our next webinar, Leading Extraordinary Teams in an Extraordinary Times. It's taking place next Tuesday on April 29th from 7 to 8 Eastern Standard Time. We hope you'll join us for another enriching and thought-provoking conversation. Thank you again for spending your time with us today. We look forward to seeing you at future events. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Keisha. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you for having me, both of you. Thank you. And for
Thank
everything
you,
you're
Thank you.
Lorena.
Thank you, Lorena.